Well, howdy folks. This here is your friend Hillbilly Scribbs with you for another one of these here episodes of the Hillbilly Hollar. Well, not exactly. See folks, we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Instead of doing a normal episode of the Hillbilly Hollar, we're going to be giving this whole podcasting thing a try and see how it goes. So sit back, strap in, get comfy, and we'll try to keep this thing from going completely off the rails. So some of you folks may have watched my last episode of the Hillbilly Hollar, and it was a little bit different. I spent a lot of time talking up my new friends in the fraction, and we're going to talk about them a lot here as well. They're a good bunch, and I am just tickled to have them all in my corner now. Well, one of the things that I did bring up during that last episode of the Hollar was maybe having people submit some questions for the Hillbilly. Maybe do sort of like a Hillbilly hotline type of episode. And I'll be honest with you, I ain't really gotten many questions back for that response. So, for half a second, the Hillbilly thought, well, maybe I'll just make some stuff up and we'll go with that. But that just don't feel right. The Hillbilly wasn't raised that way. Hillbilly was raised to tell the truth, and that's what you're gonna always get from the Hillbilly. I ain't gonna lie, I'm always gonna shoot straight with you folks. Now, I'm always gonna tell you the truth on the Hollar, or at least the version of the truth that I believe to be the truth at the time of the recording. I hope I said that right. So it may change from time to time, but we'll cross them bridges when we got to. Now, as far as like this episode of the Hollar, I said I sent out a invitation for people to send in questions for the Hillbilly. Didn't really get very much back. But what I did get back was some responses from some of my nearest and dearest, oldest friends. So I thought I might talk about them a little bit today, and in the process, maybe tell you folks about some of the Hillbillies' backstory. I know I've talked before about how I came to be in the movie trivia face-off, and I've talked a little bit about my upbringing, but there's still a lot of the Hillbilly that ain't been revealed yet. And I ain't talking about, my birthday suit. What I am talking about is how I became who I am today. And a lot of that has to do with folks that were part of my upbringing. Y'all all know that I grew up with Pap and Granny May and a whole bunch of my cousins up there in the mountains, back in the woods. We had the farm. We raised some livestock and some vegetables. We also, on account of Granny May making some super sweet moonshine, we all did a bunch of moonshining too. I've talked about that before. I've also mentioned before that I have a little bit more than a healthy obsession with them there cryptids, especially those woolly boogers and wood boogers and yahoos and Bigfoots. None of that's a secret. You all know this to be true. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell y'all a little tale about this one time I went out searching for that elusive, hairy North American ape. And, it didn't exactly turn out the way I intended, but it did help to make me into the person I am today. So, just get comfy and we're going to get started. Now, as far back as the hillbilly can remember, I've been intrigued by their boogers. Now, way back when I was just a little guy, not much bigger than knee-high to a grasshopper, I recall seeing these eyes looking in through my bedroom window at night. And when I say my bedroom window, I'm using that term loosely because there was about 20 of us cousins that shared the same bedroom. And wouldn't you know it, I always ended up being the one closest to the window. Now, bunches of nights, I remember waking up and I'd see these weird eyes looking in through the window at me. And I'd like to say it was flattering, but it was just downright spooky. Gave me the heebie-jeebies. To this day, I can't sleep close to a window. And I keep them all covered up with curtains and where you don't even know that there's a window there. And it all goes back to those eyes looking in at me. Well, as I got older, I started to see more details there. And I realized it was one of them there wood boogers. Now, this feller, or critter, or hairy man, or ape, whatever you want to call it, I don't think he ever intended any harm. I think he was just curious and checking us out. He didn't look hungry or nothing like that. So I really think he was just curious. Now, as I got older, saw less and less of him peeking in through the window. And that probably correlates, I think I used that word right. It's correlate. Yeah, I think I used it right. That kind of matches up with when I quit wetting the bed. But anyway, we can talk on that another time. But as I got older, seeing this booger looking in the window less and less. As I got a little braver, I started venturing out into the woods a little bit. And like I said earlier, I kind of had an obsession with these critters. So I started eventually venturing out into the woods, trying to see if I could find them. Now, this was before I had a camera or anything like that. I just wanted to see them. Kind of prove that this is what was peeking in through the bedroom window all those years. Well, I did find some footprints, and they looked a lot bigger than any people's footprints I ever seen. And I seen a lot of people's footprints out where we grew up on account of ain't none of us really ever worn no shoes, and ain't none of us had foots big enough to make these kinds of footprints. So I started tracking them. Probably tracked them a little bit further and deeper into the woods than I should have. Long story short, I got lost out there, folks. I was kind of lost and stumbling around for about a week, which ain't no big deal. The hillbilly's resourceful, and I know how to live off the land and all that stuff, so I wasn't starving or nothing. But I did get a little worried that I wasn't going to make it back home. I ain't got no idea how far I ended up going. But after about a week, I came to a clearing. And you will never believe what I seen in this clearing. I seen a bunch of them teepees. Now, I ain't sure what the right word is to use here. Growing up, I always called them folks that lived in the teepees Indians. But I know these days we're supposed to call them the Natural Americans. No, that ain't right. The Native Americans. And I'm going to try to do that, even though the term Indian might come out just because that's what I've always used. But I got a friend in the fraction named Ishan, and he's a real Indian, like from India. So I'm going to try to use the right term and be as politically correct as the hillbilly can. So anyway, these Native Americans were living in these teepees in this clearing. And I'm sure that I looked like one of them there woolly boogers myself when I come stumbling out of the woods, on account of I was a little unkempt and feral by that point. But you know, this tribe of Native Americans took the hillbilly in, and actually I stayed with them for quite some time, and I'm still in touch with many of them today. Now, this was sort of a lost tribe of them there Mohicans, kind of like in that story, The Last of the Mohicans. Well, these were the lost of the Mohicans, I guess. But they took me in, and I became really good friends with a bunch of them. I even got one of them their one of them their Native American names given to me by one of these fellers' mama. They called me Woundy, and that was on account of one of my good friends in there's mama said whenever I tried to speak the Mohican language, I sounded like I was wounded, like a wounded animal. So anyway, to this day, these folks call me Woundy, and that's all right. So growing up with these guys for a little bit, I came to know a bunch of them, and I thought I might talk about a couple of them here today. And we may revisit these fellers later on down the road, because they're all pretty wacky, like the hillbilly, and there's a bunch of stories we could tell about each and every one of them. Shoot, maybe at some point one of these fellers will be on the podcast with me. We'll see. But I'm going to start off today and just talk about one of these fellers. And his name is, or at the time, he went by the name Jobu, the baseball demigod. Now, I know what you're thinking, folks. That don't sound like no Native American name. And you ain't wrong. But that's what we called him. We called him Jobu. And actually, we called him a bunch of other things too. But we can get into that later. But we called him Jobu on account of this dude knows baseball frontwards and backwards and both kinds of sideways, and probably diagonally as well. Really good guy. These days, he's got a different name. These days, he's calling himself, let's see if I can remember it. These days, he's calling himself Mr. Good Times. And on account of him getting older like the rest of us, he's called Grandpa Good Times too. I don't know if I would be saying that out loud though, because that does sound kind of creepy. But anyway, that's what he's going by. And he's a really, really good guy. Now, what I can tell you about my good friend Jobu, other than him being a super big baseball fan, he's also really into the Beatles. Now, I ain't knowing how a bunch of Native Americans back in the woods up on the mountains got Beatles music, but this dude had it, and he listened to that stuff like it was, well, from the first day I met him out there. And he could play a guitar too, and again, I don't know how they got a hold of a guitar. Maybe they were doing some trading with the white man, I don't know. But he was very good on the guitar. He could play some pretty sweet licks, and sings pretty well too. So Jobu, he's all about the Beatles and all about baseball and all about having a good time. Now, I will tell a little more of this story in future episodes. I just kind of wanted to get in there and give a little tease of what might be coming down the road. One thing, in future episodes, things might get a little more, how should we say, growed up. This episode right here, I'm going to have it on the Movie Trivia Face Off YouTube channel also, so I definitely wanted to keep it family friendly. But what I can tell you is this: going forward on these episodes of what we're going to call the Hoot-N-Hollar, the Hillbilly is probably going to get a little naughty, a little mischievous, a little real. So you guys be sure to keep tuning in. Again, this episode is going to be a little different than what future episodes will be like. But I hope you enjoyed my little bit of a story today, and I will pick it up next time and tell you more about these fellers. It's just kind of hard to get into a bunch of those stories and keep it all family friendly. So I figured since Jobu was the most family friendly of all of us, I would mention him first. But there is more to come, so keep tuning in. Well, I appreciate all you fine folks listening to the episode today and spending a little time with me as I stroll down memory lane. These episodes will be coming out fairly regularly, just whenever, the Hillbilly has time to sit down with a microphone and record something. And you can find me across most social medias. All you gotta do is look up Jeff Saunders 74 or Hillbilly Scribbs. I ain't hiding, and I ain't that hard to find. Now, I will see you guys next time. Till then, y'all watch out for them there black helicopters. Those things are no joke. And don't be afraid to be a little feral from time to time. And as always, have a glorious week.